Module 3. Establishing a Community Road Safety Program. This module outlines 3 key preliminary activities which need to be undertaken in order to establish a sustainable community road safety program. Mr. Taylor will start Module 3.
But now we want to move on to Module 3, and this is what do we have to do to actually get a program operating on the ground? How do we establish one? What are the key things we need to do? The first thing is you have to convince people there's a problem that needs to be fixed. I've called it establishing the need. But people will not support your program if you are not able to explain to them there's a problem to be addressed. So the first thing to be done is establishing the need. And you can do that firstly by saying, well, this is a national issue, the national strategy shows, here's the national data. Start off at the national level in terms of explaining to people. This is a major problem for our community and for our society. That's the first thing you need to do. Then pull out from the national strategy what are those key elements that it says we ought to be doing. What's our community doing about it? Here's our national strategy. I'm talking to some individuals it might be shopkeepers, it might be motorcycle groups, it could be anybody, but you want to convince them to be involved, so they need to be able to understand what the need is, what the problem is. If we don't convince people that there's a need, they will keep asking the question, why are we doing this? Why are we doing? And you don't want them asking the question why, you want to answer the question why before you get into the actual doing of the project. The third thing you can do is to highlight the national strategy support for community programs. You can say in the national strategy, here it is, community programs are identified. They're identified in the documents as something that's important to be done for road safety. So if you're asking people at a local level to get involved, one of the justifications is it's part of our national strategy. You can identify the local road safety issues, and you don't necessarily have to have a lot of hard data for that. You can use anecdotal data. Some of the things you can use, well, what's our component of the national data? That's hard data. But you can use police information. You can say, I was talking to the policeman and he said, in the major block down the bottom of the shopping centre, we've got a major problem with speeding. Why do we know that? Well, because the police are on the road all of the time and they know that. So you can use police information, you can use health and hospital data. Hospital superintendents or doctors can say, we've had 10 people presenting in the hospital in the last month, all with head injuries from helmets, motorcycle helmets. That's a problem. Issues raised by schools. School can say, we've got a problem getting kids in and out of the school. There's too many kids getting scared of being run over by motorcycles outside the school gates. And residents' complaints are also a good source of information to indicate that there's a local problem. These things are all about making sure that these issues are identified locally. What's the local ones? They're going to make much more sense for people who say, what's our need? And finally, we need to highlight examples of local initiatives in other regions. If there's other community programs operating, get in touch with them. There might be one in another city that's doing something. Show your local people that somebody else is doing it. If somebody else is doing something, then they'll be more inclined to say, oh, we better do something. And so you'll get support. I mentioned earlier that we need to have a structure, a management structure for our community program to operate. I think there's 2 options. One is to create a separate body to run the program. I've called it a council, it could be a committee, it could be anything. But you create it. The second option is to have a lead agency. Let's look at the first. This is what a road safety council might look like. You have an independent chairperson. You have somebody whose job it is to drive your program. I've called them the executive, but that's all they do. They're the person who does the work. And you would include in your council all of the major agencies that you think are relevant to the sorts of things you will do. and that council would then run your community programs. Might have monthly meetings. What are the benefits of that approach? Well, it's independent of any agency. There is a separate executive, an officer who is responsible just to the council for delivering council work, and it has a clear road safety council. You have created the body just to do the community program. It doesn't have anything else to do. That's its job. What are the disadvantages? Well, you've got to have some money. The executive person needs a job, they need funding. You've got to find some funding for a person who's going to do the job of delivering the program. And there is no operational budget unless you can convince national government, provincial government, local government to provide it. It needs cooperation from all of the agencies to be a part of the council, and they need to see the need. That's why you've got to explain to them the need. If they understand, they're more likely to cooperate. And the chairperson in this structure, the chairperson's skills are absolutely critical. Chairperson has to be well known, well liked in the community, have a lot of influence, and to be able to negotiate well with a whole range of agencies. Very important role for the chairperson of a local community council operation. Let's have a look at the lead agency approach, and in this case I'm using local government as an example of a lead agency. In this model, local government or the lead agency would provide the committee chairperson and probably the executive officer from within their organisation. People who already have a job would take on additional role. They would then work with a community road safety committee which had included on it all the major bodies that I showed in the council. You would still have to have those major agencies with an interest having advice and having an involvement in the program, and they make a committee. Slightly different from a community road safety council approach. What's the differences? Well, the benefits, once again, it's a clear responsibility. You're asking people to run community road safety program, and the executive is resourced from the existing agency. They already have a job. And the executive also has management support in their work because they've already got a job. There's a finance department to deal with the finances. There's an HR department in local government. It's an existing organisation with an existing structure to support them. And they can draw on the administrative budget of that organisation to deliver administrative support. It also has a structure where the person who says, yes, I'll be a part of the road safety committee and I'll be the executive officer, they have a career path because they're in an existing organisation. They're not out on their own in an organisation that's not something that already exists. And there is a greater sustainability potential for this structure because it's embedded in an existing organisation. However, this method of a delivery agency is not without its disadvantages, and here are some of them. You still need to get some funding for the executive. It is unfair to expect a local government or some other agency to say, provide a chairperson and an executive officer out of their resources from their existing funds. They've already got a job to do, these people, so there needs to be some reimbursement funding, just the same as you would have in a council project. The committee may see this structure as a bit less independent than the Road Safety Council because it's embedded in an existing organisation. They may see that, they may not. Needs cooperation from all agencies, no difference there. The chairperson's skills are absolutely critical, no difference there. The chairperson still has to be the person who brings people together. And in both structure, the chairperson's skills are critical. But for the chairperson, of course, his role is added to his existing job. I'm not sure whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage, but that's what would happen with that structure. Now, I've suggested local government as a good lead agency, and I need to give you an explanation about why I think local government. Well, firstly, Local government has an existing institutional and constitutional authority in the local area, in most countries. It's a permanent functioning role. There's a town hall, there's a city government, there's city buildings, there's people employed. It's always there. So it's a structure which you can use. There's an existing management and administrative structure, and it's accustomed to coordinating with local groups and agencies. City government, that's what they do. It has local responsibility for a number of things that are relevant to a community road safety program. Certainly, general community safety is usually the responsibility of local government. Sometimes they have responsibility for the local road network. Not always, but sometimes. They're likely to have high-level consultation skills in their staff because that's the sort of work they're doing all of the time. Their existing functions broadly cover a number of the areas we might be interested in. I mean, local government does roads and rubbish and welfare and education sometimes, and planning and land development and public health. All of those issues, with perhaps the exception of rubbish, might have some relevance to a community road safety program of one sort or another. And it's accepted, local government is accepted as a governing role in the local area. So there's some of the reasons why I think local government is good. Okay, what's our first priority in the community road safety program to establishment? Let's have the strategy. What do we need to do for the strategy? It's a plan of action. That's the first thing. We understand it's a plan of action. The second thing is to see if you can get components of your road safety strategy integrated back into the broader strategy of each of the contributing agencies. Can you get the road safety components back into health strategy? Can you get it back into the local government strategy? Can you get it back into the community policing strategy? Because if you can get the components of the road safety strategy incorporated in the strategy of the existing agencies, that's their action plan. Have background of the national issues, use local information, we've talked about that, identify agreed local road trauma reduction target. That's important. We found that the best strategies are those where everybody agrees that we'll have a target. What will the target be? Well, we think we might reduce injury from road accidents in the local area by 5% in the next 12 months. Doesn't matter what it is, make sure a target is identified and make sure that target is written down and it's measurable. That focuses the mind of individuals with a strategy. Other reasons for a local road safety: identify the key behavioural objectives that you want. We've talked about that. Identify areas and issues agreed that are not to be tackled, and that's an important thing. When you are dealing with the community, there are lots of people with good intentions and they have ideas about what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done. And sometimes the most enthusiastic people will actually have silly ideas. And you've got to have a mechanism to avoid the silly ideas and to avoid fighting with people about silly ideas. One of the ways of doing that is include in your strategy things that everybody agrees is not going to be done. So when a silly idea comes up that you're not going to do, you just show them the strategy and say, oh, we've decided not to do that. You don't have to have the big fight. Very important, because some people do have silly ideas even when they're very, very well-meaning. Identify the roles of the key agencies in your strategies. What will police do? What will local government do? Local government will lead, police will enforce, the Ministry of Education will teach kids in the schools, they'll produce some materials, whatever it is that you want them to do. Identify performance reporting methods to the local community. How often do you want your community road safety group to report to the local community, and how? Is it through a bulletin? Do you have a monthly radio program? Do you get a column once a month in the local newspaper? Do you get agreement from the local mosque that the The Muller will talk about performance in local road safety once every 6 months. There's a range of ways, but you need to make sure that you have in your strategy mechanisms for communicating back out to the community. And everyone should see the strategy as the guiding document for all proposed projects. Now, what's your first project? Draw it directly from the strategy. Pick a project that involves a number of agencies. All the ones we looked at will involve a number of agencies. It's the speeding, the drink driving, the motorcycles. Don't pick one that's so small that it's only one agency involved. If it's your first project, you want to add enthusiasm. So pick a project where at least 3 or 4 agencies have something to do to help the project. Ensure it's endorsed by those key agencies, that they'll agree to do what they'll do. Have measurable objectives, and ensure the first project objectives are achievable. Don't target something that's impossible for you to achieve, because then when you finish the project and you've seen it hasn't been achieved, everyone's going to get downhearted. You don't want that. You want to have a project where your objectives are achievable, where you know, given the project that you're going to implement, it will achieve the goal. The best objectives are ones where you are looking for some behaviour change. We will reduce bad road crossing behaviour in the local shopping centre by 10%. You measure it what it is beforehand, you measure it afterwards. We've improved by 15%. We've done it. That's what you can do. So make sure that your objectives are quite precise. 2 months, perhaps 1 month, something that's tight. So here's something we put in place, here's the outcome, that was terrific, what do we do next? That will mobilise community people. Measure the targeted behaviours before and after the project. So if your targeted behaviour is, we want to reduce the vehicles speeding on Main Highway 1 by 10% during normal shopping hours, you measure that beforehand, you put in your project and you measure it afterwards. And if your project is directed at that objective, it will work. You will be able to measure that change. Mark my words. So don't worry that it won't work. It will work if you have a tight objective and you have a clear understanding about the activities you'll take that are focused on the objective. So you can measure it later on. Make sure you report the outcomes because everyone wants to know whether it worked or not. Make sure the agency contributions are acknowledged. What I call sharing the success. Don't hold it to yourself as the lead agency. Make sure if education's done something that the education and the teachers in the schools are given acknowledgement of that. Make sure if the police do something that the police are supported and acknowledged for that. It's a community program. It takes wider community members to do it. We must acknowledge their assistance. Now, here are some options for projects that could be your first project. You could do local area speeding, and we've done a look at that. You could do local area drink driving. Tight local area. You could do a safe routes to school where there are problems in schools. Don't worry about that. You could do strip shopping area pedestrian safety and improve the pedestrian safety for shoppers in street shopping. All of those, I am sure, if you designed a tight, well thought through project, you will get a benefit and you will be able to measure a benefit and show that your project works. That's your project. The final step for implementing is to establish your project and then build it into a total program. Because one project is not a program. A program is a number of projects that your community road safety group will undertake over a 12-month period, drawn directly from the strategy. Again, you link it to the strategy, and something in the national strategy is good. Don't have any more than 3 or 4 projects in a year. It's too hard. Too hard at a community level. You're dealing with people, many providing their time as volunteers. It is much too hard to do more than 3 or 4 projects a year. That's my experience. Now, you may be able to do more than that, but I certainly found that people in my area had real difficulty doing more than 3 or 4 projects a year. And then, if you can possibly do it, establish different leadership roles for some of the agencies in the project. So if you've got, I don't know, let's say you have a project that requires a lot of construction, you might ask the local government construction area to be the lead agency for that project and coordinate some of the others. Whereas if you've got one that has a lot of educational materials, you might ask the local schools to be the lead agency, even though all the others are still involved. So you're just spreading the work a bit. Don't get the same people to do all the work all the time. It's too hard. You need to identify the evaluation criteria, and remember, again, behaviours, behaviours, behaviours. Always measure about behaviours. That'll make more sense after afternoon tea. One of the things that can be done is you can publish what you're going to do and make that available to the community to build a lot of community support with an action plan calendar. And you can make links with the community road safety programs. And when you have success, celebrate it. Have a little event, morning tea, afternoon tea, whatever it is, with all of the players. Say, we've had something successful. Put some of the resource that you might have to celebrating success. It's a very important part. Here's the action plan calendar that I've got here. That's one that was taken, as you can see, it's quite old, 1996 or something. That was taken as part of an action plan calendar statewide, as this one was, for the state of New South Wales. But included in the calendar was areas for community action under each activity. What that does, of course, is tells everybody in the community what we're going to do. We're doing drink driving now, then we're doing speeding, and then we're going to look at school children's safety. The other thing is celebrating success. This is a program from local government road safety awards, which were generated around about the same time for all those community programs that were undertaken. And we had an awards night. And we all got dressed up. I think I had a bow tie. And the awards were decided by a judging panel, and those awards went to the individual community programs that had achieved best at that time. And you can see there's different categories for the awards. This is not the greatest publication in the world, but it was a celebration at a night where we had a dinner for all of the people involved in community road safety programs. That's again, an example of celebrating the success. They're some of the key features I think you need to take into account if you're going to establish a program.